This is the Butter Book by Anna Stockwell. It's shaped like an actual stick of butter. Not inspired by, not evokes, shaped like one. It even has the vellum wrapper, the blue type, the yellow pages, and inside of that stick of butter, there are exactly 10 recipes. 10. Only 10. And on any other day, that number is a red flag on this channel. But today, I'm cooking from it anyway, to answer one question. Is this an actual cookbook, or is this just a collectible? Welcome back to Cookbook Reviewer. I score everything on outcome and CPR, cussing per recipe, a full breakdown coming up. Across everything I've reviewed on this channel, I have never, ever seen a cookbook shaped like the actual ingredient itself. Let's find out if that's a gimmick or the whole point. Anna Stockwell is a cookbook author, food stylist, recipe developer, writer, culinary consultant, and video host. She was previously a senior food editor at Epicurious and Bon Appetit, and she's worked in a bunch of editorial test kitchens over the years. She's got a degree in the classic culinary arts from the International Culinary Center, plus a BA in philosophy from Bates College. She lives in New York's Hudson Valley with her husband and 2 cats, and she's already got one cookbook out called For the Table, built around dinner party menus and larger group gatherings. That philosophy background actually shows up in her approach. Her whole thing is that a meal isn't just the food, it's the ambiance, the company, the conversation. Everything approachable, everything flexible, everything meant to be enjoyable rather than fussy. Worth keeping in mind once we get into whether this book delivers on that. Chronicle Books put this one out on March 17th, 2026, and it is not a cookbook in the way we normally use that word on this channel. It's closer to a kitchen companion. You get a history of butter going back to 9000 BCE, a buying guide, a whole section on butter, accessories, technique writing on whipping, clarifying, browning, and emulsifying, instructions for butter boards and butter sculptures, and then eventually 10 recipes. That ratio matters a lot. Most of this book isn't recipes at all. It's $19.95 for 112 pages, and if you're counting cost per recipe, that comes out to about $2 a recipe, which isn't bad on its own, but compare that to a normal cookbook where you're getting way more recipes for a similar price, and this one starts looking expensive by comparison. Anna Stockwell calls this the most comprehensive butter guide out there, worth keeping that specific claim in mind because we're about to test it. Chronicle Books is the publisher behind this one, an independent press out of San Francisco that's been around since the Summer of Love, which I Googled and it said it was like 1969 or something like that. Their whole stated philosophy is that design should support the content and that every book should feel like an object worth treasuring, not just words on a page. That explains a lot about why this book looks the way that it does. Again, that vellum wrapper, the blue type, the stick of butter shape, none of it's by accident. It's Chronicle doing exactly what they say that they like to do. Keep that in mind because the shape comes back up later, and not in a good way once we get to the book quality. The history section is where this book actually earns its keep. Butter goes back to the Neolithic period, somewhere between 9000 and 8000 BC, likely in Central Asia, and the leading theory is that it was actually a complete accident. Nomads were hauling milk around in skin pouches on long treks and journeys, and hours of getting jostled around on a pack animal did what a stand mixer does today. So the idea is that nobody set out to invent butter, butter just happened to them. The Romans had access to butter early on and used it for medicine and skincare instead of eating it, which feels like a pretty giant waste. The ancient Egyptians used it in mummification. My favorite piece of trivia in the whole book is that in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church taxed butter as an indulgence during Lent, and people paid it so willingly that the tax funded an entire tower of Rouen Cathedral. It's actually called the Butter Tower now, and it's still standing in Normandy, and I love that something that is so ordinary that I use for every breakfast, buttering my toast, is a cathedral tower. What's really interesting is butter spent decades getting blamed for heart disease based on science that's since been walked back, and it's only really clawed its way back into the favor in the last couple of decades. Even my own family lived through this. My mom used margarine when I was a kid because she believed butter was that bad for you. She'd be horrified if she saw how much butter I go through now, both baking and cooking. Watching butter go from villain to comeback story like that actually made me appreciate butter a lot more than I expected. Normally, I run CPR and outcome scores on a handful of recipes and weigh that 70% against a 30% book quality score. This book only has 10 recipes total, so instead of pulling a random sample, I picked 4 things that cover the range of what this book is trying to really teach and convey. Since most of this book isn't recipes, I'm scoring the non-recipe content just as carefully. That means asking real questions. Is the history section interesting or just filler? Is the buying guide something you'd actually use? Does the technique section teach you a skill you'll keep coming back to? Those answers carry real weight in my final verdict. One more thing before we get into it, you'll hear what my family thought of each recipe too, but the scores you see are mine alone. Everyone tastes food a little differently, and keeping the scoring to just me is what keeps it kind of consistent across every single video. Clarified butter goes by another name, drawn butter. It's butter that's been melted, simmered, and strained until the water and milk solids are gone, leaving just the butter fat behind. You lose the milk solids, but the butter flavor stays. Here's what makes that worth doing. Regular butter burns and smokes once you push the heat up because those milk solids scorch. Strip them out, and that butter can handle much higher temperatures without burning. I'm making mine to go with Pommes Anna, since that dish needs butter that can sit in a hot pan without scorching. One thing to know before you try this yourself, you'll lose about 1/4 of your butter's volume in the process. Start with more than you think you need. Straining it cleanly took a lot more time than I expected, and by the end I was flat out annoyed. That's why I'm giving this a CPR of 3. Stockwell gives you 12 compound butter recipes in this book, each one with a recommended pairing. That's more range than I actually expected from this book because it's so short. I made the Maître d'Hôtel butter, which is basically the original compound butter. It's just softened butter mixed with parsley, lemon juice, salt, rolled into a log and chilled. That simple format, soften it, mix in a flavor, roll it, chill it, is the exact template every other compound butter in this book follows. Once French chefs landed on that formula, it became the blueprint for every variation that came after it. Stockwell says it works on practically anything. I paired mine with 2 fillets, basting them in while they were cooking, then finishing with a dollop on top while they rested. Mix, roll, chill, done. Compound butter takes almost no effort, and this one delivered exactly on that promise. My family gave this butter a 10, no notes. I give this a CPR of 1 with an outcome of 8. Butterscotch actually has a pretty specific origin story. It traces back to 1817 to a confectioner named Samuel Parkinson's in Yorkshire. His original recipe was just butter, sugar, and trestle boiled together, and it really took off after Queen Victoria was gifted a tin of it in 1851. Nobody agrees on where the name comes from. Some say it's from scorching the sugar, some say it's from scoring the candy into pieces before it hardens, and some people still insist it's a nod to Scotland, even though there's really no evidence for that one at all. The pudding version we know today, soft and custardy instead of a hard candy, is actually an American spin-off of that original British candy, and its exact origin is a lot murkier. Full disclosure, I don't love butterscotch as a flavor, so this score might be a little bit unfair to the recipe itself. My family doesn't share the same skepticism. They gave it a straight 10. The process itself was smooth, with one exception. Stockwell doesn't list water as an ingredient, even though the method calls for 2 tablespoons of it. I had everything else measured and prepped, and then I had to stop and go and find water. Small thing, but exactly the kind of gap that trips people up mid-recipe. CPR of 2 for this one and an outcome of 8. My 8 next to their 10 tells you exactly how much my bias is dragging this down. Next up is a recipe that gave me the most trouble all day. Pommes Anna is a classic French dish where you slice potatoes paper thin, layering them in a tight overlapping circle in a heavily buttered pan, and bake the whole thing until it holds together like a cake. Getting those slices thin and even, then layering them into neat circles takes a real amount of attention and a steady hand. Anna's photos shows the dish already flipped, so what you're actually looking at is the bottom of the potatoes, not the top. I didn't clock that. I was watching my top layer the whole time, waiting for it to get that same deep golden crisp I saw in the picture, and when the edges started crisping up, I let it go a little bit longer than the instructions actually called for. That one's totally on me, not the book. By the time I flipped it, some of the potatoes had just gone a little bit past golden brown into slightly burnt territory. Even so, when it came together, the crust that did crisp up was shattering and buttery, and the inside stayed soft and tender all the way through. My family gave it a straight 10, burnt edges and all. Still delicious. This had a CPR of 4, but if you don't have a mandolin, I'd raise that another point or 2. with an outcome of 9. This book really isn't selling you recipes. It's selling you an appreciation of butter, a kitchen staple most of us use every day without thinking about. Once I let go of wanting more recipes out of it, I actually enjoyed spending time with this book. But a few things cost it points along the way. The book is shaped like an actual stick of butter, which makes for a fun object and a bad shape for a cookbook. It's smaller than a standard cookbook, so it doesn't sit well on the cookbook stand, and recipes end up split across multiple pages, so you have to flip back and forth on recipes that would have fit on one page in a normal-sized cookbook. Cute on a shelf, annoying in active use. And on the recipe side, Stockwell's Butterscotch Pudding doesn't list water as an ingredient, even though the method calls for 2 tablespoons of it. I had everything else prepped before I realized I needed something else because it wasn't listed on the ingredients list. None of that ruins the book, it just keeps it from being flawless. Weighing the strong history section and technique writing against the shape and that one recipe gap, I landed on a 7. Recipe quality averaged to an 8.3, book quality landed at a 7, weighted 70-30, that comes out to a 7.9 out of 10. If you're looking for a cookbook packed with recipes, this just isn't it. 10 recipes for $19.95 is a hard sell if that's what you're measuring it against. But if you think of it more as a celebration of butter, a small love letter to one ingredient, it earns its place. The history section is interesting, the technique section teaches real skill, and every single thing that I made from this book turned out well. This is a gift first and a reference book second. Buy it for someone who loves to cook and would enjoy geeking out over butter for an afternoon. Don't buy it expecting a workhorse cookbook you'll pull off the shelf week after week. That's the Butter Cookbook by Anna Stockwell, a 7.9 out of 10. Not the recipe volume some of you might want, but a well-made case for slowing down and appreciating one ingredient we all use without thinking about it. This is the Cookbook Reviewer, and I'll see you in the next one.